recently received this from a friend. Have you guys ever played Dungeons and Dragons? This is a D20 die from that game. I thought it would be perfect to tap in one of these videos. I have a Dungeons and Dragons campaign going on with the Dungeon Cast. It'll actually be out next year. If you're into fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons, go and check out my brother's channel. But you're not here for Dungeons and Dragons. You're here for creepy stories. And I have chosen a few of them that are new and well written. I just want to thank everybody who went on my Instagram and voted in the poll for which video I should create next. It was between gaming, creepy stories, or something new, and the majority chose creepy stories. So here I am, and here's the video you asked for. This first story is called I Don't Know How Many Times He Entered My Apartment. I've hesitated to share this story for a long time because I know how important the mutual trust between a resident and their landlord maintenance staff is, and I don't want to instill any unnecessary distrust in anyone's landlord. I've shared stories before about dangerous and scary residents I encountered while working at apartment complexes, but this is a story about my time on the other side of things as a renter. Before I had even graduated from high school, I knew I wanted to live at Paradise Apartments. I was a bit naive at the time, drawn in by the many amenities I would never use, but I primarily wanted to live there because the complex was pet friendly and within my small budget. When the time eventually came for me to get my own place, I sublet the only apartment they had available and moved in. Unfortunately, I came to realize the apartment wasn't as nice as I'd originally thought. The building was old but remodeled, so it had all the typical plumbing issues and thin walls. I also learned it was not the safest part of town. I was primarily an online student. I had one class that met in person twice a week around 8 a.m. The rain is really loud. I wonder if the mic's catching it. Okay. I was primarily an online student, but I had one class that met in person twice a week around 8 a.m. I'm a bit of a homebody, so I rarely left during the day, except for that class. The occasional shopping excursion or to spend time with my boyfriend in the evening after he got off of work. My apartment was a bit of a Bermuda Triangle, even though it was only 600 square feet and I lived alone. Things had a way of growing legs and walking away. I had 2 kittens at the time and blamed them regularly for things disappearing. Something odd that kept reoccurring, however, was that I'd find my underwear. Oh gosh. Something odd that kept reoccurring, however, is that I'd find my underwear box out and sitting in the center of my bedroom floor on days when I had class. I didn't have a proper dresser, instead using an IKEA shelf with some IKEA boxes for designated clothes. I always could have sworn I'd put the underwear box away after getting ready for class, but I I started to think that some of my laundry was disappearing as well, as favorite articles of clothing would go into the laundry hamper and seemingly never come back with the cleaned clothes. Towards the end of that semester, I was working one evening on a homework assignment when my boyfriend called to let me know his roommate had accidentally locked him out of their apartment. I had a key to their place, so he asked if I could run over real quick to let him in. Before I left, I made a mental note that I had left literally every light in my apartment on. Because I was living on a pretty tight budget, I normally made a point of turning off all the lights when I left, but my boyfriend only lived about 5 minutes away, so I knew I'd be there and back very quickly. Sure enough, I got back less than 15 minutes later. I immediately sensed something was off. I could see the lights were off through the blinds. I called my boyfriend and he drove over to meet me. We unlocked the door and went in. All the lights were off in my apartment. Thinking maybe I'd had a power outage, I flipped on the main light and it came on. My boyfriend checked the entire apartment. No one was inside, but someone had gone through and systematically turned off every light at their switch, including my lizard's basking light, the only light I always left on because it was on a timer, and my laptop, which I'd left open on my assignment, but now the computer had been powered down and it was closed. We called the emergency maintenance number and I explained that someone had been inside my apartment and that they had to have used a key because there was no sign of forced entry. The manager called me back and told me I had to be imagining things. Maybe I had forgotten that I had turned off the lights before I left. I'm sorry, what customer service, maintenance, landlord, apartment employee tells you you're imagining things? Ugh, that's so annoying. I assured him that I wouldn't have turned off the computer or the lizard light. Someone had been in my apartment. I told him I was extremely worried because obviously this person had a key to get in. Either way, they worked for the complex, or maybe it was a previous tenant or guest. I asked if they had changed the locks after the previous tenant moved out, and they assured me they changed the locks after every move out. The manager suggested maybe it was a friend pranking me, someone else I had given a key. The only other people I'd given keys were my boyfriend. His key to my apartment had been locked inside his apartment on the same key ring as his own apartment key. And my mom, she lived 3 hours away. In any case, neither of them would have pranked me in this way. The manager finally agreed to send someone out immediately to change the lock for my own peace of mind. I brought up my concern that it was someone on the staff since they would be the only other people with keys. The manager claimed the keys were locked in a special safe that required a personalized code to track who took what keys and when. I can't vouch for that. I've worked at an apartment as a manager, and there is a code that you have to put in to track whoever puts in keys and puts back keys. So, sounds legit. As far as I was aware, there were only 2 maintenance men that worked at the complex. One nice older man that didn't seem all that skilled, and a younger guy with a scruffy beard that gave me a bad feeling. I suspected he had to be the one that had come in. When I had first moved in, the manager had told me I would be getting a new kitchen counter within the first 3 days. I waited to move in my kitchen stuff, but after a week, they hadn't come, and then after a few months, I had completely forgotten about it. One day, I was sitting in my living room, and this scruffy maintenance guy walked in without knocking or announcing himself, and I hadn't received a notice to expect him. He said he was there to replace my countertop. It took him 2 days to install one small piece of counter. A few weeks later, I was getting out of the shower and heard a single knock at the door. I called out, "Just 1 minute," and hurried to get some clothes. Not 2 seconds later, the door started to open and I had to slam it shut. It was still wrapped in a towel to stop him from coming in. He claimed he hadn't heard me call out, but I had my doubts. I don't remember also made a note about my third cat being cute, except I didn't have a third cat. So creepy, so creepy. I did, however, have a picture of my childhood cat in my bedroom on the IKEA shelf where I kept my clothes. At that point, I went to the office to ask them to make a note in my file that I wanted at least 24 hours notice before entry going forward, and I wanted to always be present for future entry. Now that I knew without a shadow of a doubt that someone was coming in secretly, it all made sense. It hadn't been long after the surprise maintenance visit stopped that things had started moving around in my apartment. He was also on site all the time. Everyone on staff always lived at Paradise, so he would know when I came and went. Who knew how many times he had snuck in, how many small souvenirs he had stolen? He could have been coming in while I was asleep. After the night with the lights, I put my own lock on the door, but still didn't totally trust the apartment. I ended up buying a condo shortly after, with help from my parents, subleased the apartment, and moved. Right around that time, I also got my first job working in a different apartment complex. In the final days before I left, my mom came into town to help me move my stuff. While she was home alone, I was at class. She caught the scruffy maintenance man trying to get his key to work in my lock. She demanded to know what he was doing, and he said he was there to paint the front door. I hadn't received a notice, and he didn't have any paint or supplies. She told him he could wait until after I had moved out. My God. A few years later, I was shopped by the owner of Paradise Apartments while working at another complex in town. Shopping is when an employee from one apartment complex takes a tour at another apartment complex under the guise of wanting an apartment for the purpose of gaining information they might not otherwise easily give up. It can also be performed by your own management company to make sure you're doing a good job. There were certain tells a shopper always gave, like asking specifically worded questions. Is it safe here? I'm a felon. Can I live here? Etc. That required specifically worded answers and were easy to trip up on. Being too wealthy for the complex, Rolex watch, sports car, nice suit, etc. And being too flexible on what they were interested in. While I was giving the tour, he asked if I had any opinions on other apartment complexes in town, and mentioned Paradise specifically. Normally, I wouldn't badmouth any other complexes. I preferred to win them over by showing them the positives of our community. But I told him that I probably wasn't the best person to answer that question, because I was probably the only person to give Paradise a bad review in the last 5 years. He asked me to elaborate. I told him my apartment had been broken into, and I suspected it was someone on their maintenance staff. At that point, he revealed that he was the owner of Paradise, and that he was very disturbed to hear I'd had this experience. He asked me to describe the maintenance man in detail. I assured him it was in the past and I was over it, but he insisted on calling the manager over at Paradise to ask him over speakerphone if they had any issues with the maintenance staff back in the year I had lived there. He answered yes. There had been a scruffy young maintenance man he'd had to fire because he'd been caught multiple times breaking into apartments of single women. Satisfied, the owner proudly told me the issue had been resolved and asked if I would be willing to change my review. I told him no. None of this had changed the fact I'd experienced this, and actually validated what I had suspected. In the years I worked as a leasing agent, I learned a lot about where complexes will cut corners to save time and money. From my experience, a lot of complexes did not switch out the locks if the tenant was good, and a lot did not require background checks for employees, even though they did require them for tenants. Keys also got passed out willy-nilly to vendors and maintenance during turns, and employees frequently got master keys that would open all doors. I won't go so far as to say every complex operates this way, but every complex I worked at was doing this when I started there. Because of my own experiences, once I began managing a complex, I enforced strict rules rules about changing locks, tracking keys, posting proper notices, and requiring background checks for all employees and tenants. At least here in Florida, with Mia's law going into effect this year, background checks for employees and security measures for keys are required for all complexes. Even still, if you're renting an apartment, stay diligent. If you have reason to believe someone is coming into your home, document it and let the staff, police, family, and friends know. You never know who might have a key to your apartment, and that is the truth. Very crazy story and very believable, honestly. If you're living alone, just be careful. Be careful. I'm trying to remember my experience as a manager for an apartment, and we did change locks after every move, ripped out the carpets and cleaned the place up, There's always creepy people everywhere you go. A lot of the employees were creeps, especially maintenance. For some reason, I have no idea why maintenance staff are always weird, creepy guys. And tow truck drivers too, in my experience. I'm not generalizing everyone, but in my experience, maintenance employees and tow truck drivers are usually pretty creepy. Anyway, on to story 2. Alright, this next story is called I Waved Back at a Man. Now I think he wants to hurt me. Every day I walk home from school with my friend because she lives only a bit away from me, so our routes line up. At the start of the school year, we noticed there was a man usually looking at us from his window while we walked home from school. I found it a little weird, but ultimately didn't think much of it. A few months ago, after the heat of summer died down a bit, he started sitting out on his porch when we were walking by. Usually he would smile at us. Sometimes I smiled back, but I usually just ignored him. One day, as I was walking by his house, he waved to me from where he was sitting. I stopped and waved back at him and told him to have a nice afternoon as I walked past. It felt a little weird because he didn't really reply, but eventually I forgot about the whole thing. Once when my mother was at work and I was alone at our house, I noticed him walking past my house several times through my window. I felt very creeped out and uncomfortable. I considered talking to my parents about it just in case, but I ultimately convinced myself he wasn't doing anything wrong, so it didn't really matter. Yesterday, I walked home from school alone because I stayed behind with some other kids outside the school for a few hours since we had art club that day, and I didn't want to walk home just to have to come back fairly soon after. I had just bought myself a nice pair of wired headphones a few weeks ago with money I'd been saving up for a long time. I was playing them over one ear as I was walking home. On the way home, there is a public lot with a stable on it that I like to cut through to get into my yard as quick as I can, rather than walking around the property. Sometimes people like to hang around it too to meet up, but there wasn't anyone on it that I could see. As I rounded the corner on the stables, someone grabbed the back of my shirt. From the way they were grabbing it, I could see part of their hand. I jerked forward and they grabbed the top part of my headphone. The wire was at the bottom part of my neck and it got stuck for a moment, and I remember feeling like if I couldn't get away, something very bad was going to happen. The wire eventually snapped and I took off running as fast as I could, screaming. They let go of my shirt and I hopped the half-length fence to our property and ran as fast as I could onto the sidewalk in front of my house because I was worried that I would take too long on the lock if they were following me. By the time I actually got to the sidewalk, I was crying and felt like I was going to collapse because I was so scared. When I looked over my shoulder, I couldn't see anyone, but I kept running until I reached my friend's house in case whoever was there was still around. When I got there, I was in tears and it took a bit to explain the situation because they couldn't understand me. I tried calling my mother, but she wouldn't pick up the phone. My friend's mom called the police and they came to check things out. There was nobody at the stables, and they told me that it was most likely some kid trying to mess around, but they escorted because I was worried they would think I was crazy, considering he hasn't technically done anything, but there's something in my mind that keeps telling me that it was him who grabbed me at the Staples. When I was walking home from school today, I brought a screwdriver with me in case I needed to defend myself. I also had my friend with me. My mother offered to pick me up from school, but I was worried that if I had shown how the encounter had affected me, then it would make things worse. I also avoided the Staples, and my friend made sure I made it to the door. The guy on his porch wasn't there today, and I'm still not fully sure if it's him or not. I feel terrible that my headphones broke, but I can't help but wonder what would have happened if they didn't. I will update if anything else happens. I'm using a spare account in case any personal details not in this post can be found on my main account. So, this story does have an update, and I am going to read it right now. The update is titled, "My stalker still hasn't given up. It's been over a month since this nightmare first started. The man who has been watching me as I come home from school has started walking back and forth to and from the sidewalk in front of my house again. He has done this 3 times since my last post, and every time I've seen it, I've been home alone. I've called my mother to let her know every time he's been around, and we've contacted the police to tell them that he keeps coming by our house, but they haven't been able to do anything except record it since he's never actually stepped foot on our property until recently. Starting this week, I started noticing tapping and scratching sounds coming from downstairs, starting as soon as it becomes dark. It's been worrying me a great deal, but I've been too scared to look outside until recently because my dogs weren't barking, and they always do if they hear something strange outside. When I finally got the courage to look outside, I saw a person hunched over a few feet away from the entrance to our house. I couldn't see any of their facial features because they were wearing a large hoodie and keeping their face down. It looked like they were scraping something across the siding of our house. Immediately, I dialed the police and hid somewhere in case they wanted to break in. As soon as the police arrived, though, the person ran off and was not pursued. I spoke with the police when they started to check things out, but again, nothing could be done as there wasn't any proof that anything had even happened at all, besides them seeing him run off. They said they'd be keeping an eye out in the future, but at the very most, it was only trespassing. I brought up the fact that I was attacked not long ago by some strange man, and that I thought they were the same person, but I was once again brushed off. The police said it was possible, but without any actual evidence that they were the same person, nothing could be done, since I couldn't accurately recognize the person outside my window, and I also wasn't seriously hurt. I don't know what kind of evidence is needed to do something about someone stalking a minor who is home alone, but apparently I didn't have it. I'd be pissed. This morning, a small brown package was left on the doorstep, and in it were pieces of electronic parts that I did not recognize, and plastic shards with crumpled newspaper at the bottom, and a note that said, "Sorry," with a frowny face at the top. My mother notified the police again. They said they just keep an eye out for anything suspicious. I feel like they're not doing anything, and that they won't do anything until I'm seriously hurt or worse. I took some advice from some previous comments, and now I keep glitter spray with me when I walk home from school, along with my screwdriver and a knife in my room, just in case someone breaks in, but I can't do anything else, and I'm not confident at all that I could win in a fight against a fully grown man. Sorry, I'm getting emotional. I'm worried about what will happen in the future, and I don't even feel safe in my own home. Even when the doors are locked, I check every possible place someone could be waiting for me before settling down, but I don't think it's enough. Any advice is welcome. More than anything, I just want him to leave me alone. My God, that is crazy. I'm pissed that these cops aren't doing anything. police pursued him when he ran off. I don't know if there's gonna be another update or not. Hopefully not. Hopefully this motherfucker leaves her alone. Be careful when you're home alone. Always have pepper spray on you. Okay. I have one last short story, and it's creepy. I imagined the story play out in my head, and I was like, holy shit, that's crazy. So, I'm gonna read it to you. This story is called The Baker Boy. When my mother was a little girl, she spent her early years in a remote area of Mexico. No electricity, no running water, and definitely no air conditioning. Due to so many people all living in one small house, it wasn't uncommon for her and a few other of her siblings to sleep on the porch. Yes, you heard that right. They slept on pallets outside. She recalls it was actually much cooler some nights on the porch than it was in the house. Sorry, my hair is like bugging. The porch had a screen that my grandfather installed, and he also built their house by his own hand. The closest neighbor was miles away, so from my understanding, this house was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Now this is where this ghost story begins. It is a ghost story. My mom and 3 of her siblings were the lucky ones who got to sleep outside every night. They never had any problems or fears until the night the Baker Boy came around. A small child with golden curls dressed in white baking attire, wearing a mask that was made out of a real skinned pig. He would walk in circles around the house, reciting a certain phrase that my mother never really understood because it wasn't speaking Spanish or English. At first, they were scared, but over time, they grew to appreciate his presence. It was almost as if he were walking around the house to protect them from whatever fate had maybe happened to him. They never knew who he was or if he was even real, just that they would all see him at night. My grandpa never believed them and assumed they were making it all up to come inside the house. But they swore they weren't. It wasn't until over time an outline of his path began to show up around the house. Needless to say, they didn't stay in the house much longer and moved before they eventually made it into the States. The strangest part is that before my grandpa died, he told me he had finally seen him, the blonde boy with the pig mask. And that's the end of that story. I think it's just creepy, having a real big skin mask over your head. That's really scary. I wonder if it's true, because that would be fucking insane. But anyway, it is very scary living alone. So, stay safe out there, guys, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like and please subscribe. Bye.